because it had a link to maps that showed you which sections were going to be blocked off on which days. So just be careful. You might try and get in a driveway that's blocked. That's why. And also, thank you to George Helmer for organizing that and for organizing re-roofing this. Okay, so welcome to today's forum on housing. It's been quite a while since we've had a forum on our affordable housing project at St. Jude's, and the housing team has a lot to share since then. So let's begin with prayer. Holy, beloved, and life-giving God, we thank you for being with us today and for all that you have shared with us, and for how you continue to teach us how we might share our abundance individually, corporately, and nationally. Thank you for the hard work and dedication of our housing team in exploring low-cost housing at St. Jude's. We ask that we would all listen with open hearts to how your Spirit may move us in serving your people in Cupertino and beyond. In Jesus' name, amen. So, let me first introduce the team. Can you move it a slide? Judy Foote, Sarah Zavi, Festus Ojo, Jen Sheeran, Jeffrey Pugh, and J.R. Fruin. These guys have been working their butts off. They have been researching and researching and researching on our behalf. And they're researching the possibility of affordable housing here. They visited other congregations and spoken to the people who ran those programs to learn of resources that they used, people, contractors, what worked, what didn't work, lessons learned. They've interviewed architects, among many others. They've researched government requirements, both local and state. They're handing out monthly updates now, which you should get with your announcements when you come in. And it's also, we have now a board in the Narthex that has these previous month's announcements. Please look at the board in the Narthex to keep up to date with what's going on. And their last big project was applying for a grant for a feasibility study, which has entailed filling out a lot of paperwork, interviews, and attending conference. Jen Sheeran has done an incredible job at being their team captain, so many applause for Jen. And I really commend this group of people, this team, for their incredible work that they have done and will continue to do on our behalf. So let's give another round of applause, please. And before we begin, I know many of us have some preconceived ideas what affordable housing is, how it's managed, who manages, who qualifies for it. So I ask that we put our preconceived ideas to the side for this forum, and that you would listen to what they're saying and not put your preconceived filters in what they're saying, so that you can hear the actual words that they are saying will make it to your brain without you first reinterpreting it. Listen to their words, not your words. And during the presentation, please hold your questions till the end. There are Post-it notes and pens around for you to write your questions on. We will collect those near the end and answer your questions then. We will go through and sort the questions so that all the similar ones get answered together and the other similar ones get answered together. So hopefully we can answer more questions that way than during the presentation. So when you want to do this, instead get your pen and write, okay? And I now hand it off to Jen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this. I just wanted to run through some milestones. Thank you so much to Robin. Robin's been wonderful. She's been with us about a month now on the team and has made a discernible difference in our work. So we really appreciate that. Here's some milestones that housing here at St. Jude's has gone through. First, the diocesan-wide effort to reach out and help live out our faith in our community and how we can help out those locally. Then in our parish survey, it showed that affordable housing was a priority for the parish. Then we went and formed a housing team to address both the diocesan question as well as what we said as a parish. And then we held a town hall just to try to get some input on what you guys were thinking, concerns, ideas, etc. Then we went to a parish survey, which told us, who are you thinking about living in the housing? What do you think about, housing, clergy housing? Are you excited? Are you not excited? That sort of thing. We then hired an architect to do some really early concept drawings, which you're going to see here today. And we got some expert advice from Trinity Wall Street. They have a division called Trinity Mission Real Estate Division. And what they do, or development, Mission Real Estate Development. And what they do is they help parishes like ours and like Episcopal parishes across the nation, and sometimes even overseas, to use their property to its fullest for whatever their missional goals are. So that could be a variety of things. A lot of people have chosen to look into affordable housing now. And then now, this is where we are right now. The vestry earlier this year approved our guiding principles, and our team has been working, as Robin mentioned, on our feasibility work and on the enormous grant application, which took a lot of time for us. So let me go on to the next slide. So I know that you're all wondering, well, what are these guiding principles that the vestry approved? And I don't want to read this whole slide, so I'm just going to give you 20 seconds to look at it and see what you think. So if you have any questions on this particular one, two things: you can find it on the bulletin board in the narthex if you want to read it and think about it thoughtfully, pray on it, etc. Or if you have questions about it for today, please write a question on one of the pieces of paper in the middle of the table. This is where our process is, and if you guys have seen the housing updates every month, you have seen this chart. So you're probably very familiar with it. We are in the feasibility process, which takes a while, and it's, what is possible to do? It hopefully will answer a lot of the questions that people have about clergy and affordable housing. And also, as you can see, after each step, there's a vestry approval. So there is that stopgap. It's a gate, if any of you work on engineering projects like I used to, where it's a go, no go. So we're going to run everything by vestry when we get to that point. Next, we have Sarah.
Hey, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why are we considering clergy housing and why are we considering affordable housing. So first of all, why it's important to consider clergy housing. So what you see here on the right-hand side is a graph of what it looks like when we're talking about mortgages in the area. One, we all know that the rate that you pay on your mortgage, someone help me. Interest rate. Interest rates are crazy right now, which of course means that your monthly payment on a mortgage is even worse than it was before. So if we look at this graph, we have to keep in mind that affordable housing is clergy housing, and clergy housing is affordable housing because we do not have the funds as a congregation, as a diocese, to pay our clergy what they would need to be paid in order to afford to have a house that they own in this area. Right now we have about $400K in a housing fund. If you were to take that amount and put it as a down payment into a mortgage, these are the monthly payments you would be looking at for those two mortgages. So in Cupertino itself, the average house right now is $3 million. In the entirety of San Jose, the average house is $1.5 million. That's the entirety of San Jose. If we were looking for our clergy to live anywhere near Cupertino, we're really looking at $2 million, at least, which is the reason that we have these kind of three different graphs. A lot of people along our journey of looking at this have asked the question, well, why can't we just buy a piece of land and build on it? The land is the most expensive thing, not only in Cupertino, but in all of the Bay Area. A bare piece of land in Cupertino is upwards of $1 million, $1.5 million. So there would be no way for us to feasibly be able to buy a piece of land and then build on it. But we have our land, and so that's why we're looking to build on our land, because we already have it, and it is ours. Let's move on. So why it's important to consider affordable housing. I'm going to talk a little in a later slide about kind of what is affordable housing, but just, or in actuality, but just to look at the numbers. What we're looking at as far as in Silicon Valley, even to be considered low income, you have to be making at like under $102,000. I heard a statistic on NPR at some point this week that there is literally nowhere in the United States where you can be above the poverty line making minimum wage. Nowhere in the United States. So there's definitely, I think, still a notion that people have that, well, if you can't afford to live here, why are you still living here? And that's not really the issue here. The issue is, this is an issue everywhere in the United States, and it's a really bad issue here. And we're here, and so we really need to do whatever we can to support the people that are living here and the people that have jobs that we need to have living here. We need teachers, we need firefighters, we need nurses, we need everyone. Teachers qualify for low-income housing. Most teachers that are being paid by the Cupertino school districts qualify for low-income housing. The South Bay is the second in the nation for income to housing ratio. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. I certainly have. We are paying way, way more for housing than is recommended. Next slide. Okay, so this graph is a little confusing, so let me walk you through it. What you're looking at is the average net pay for a teacher in Cupertino, a firefighter in Cupertino, and a nurse in Cupertino. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing that as average monthly net pay. On the right-hand side, you are seeing the percentage of that net pay in compared to housing. So you can see in San Jose, and again, this is all of San Jose averaged out, teachers are still paying over 50% of their net pay for housing. Even nurses are paying 45%. If you go to Cupertino, it gets even worse. In Cupertino, an average teacher who makes Cupertino rates is paying above 60% of their monthly pay to get housing. And even a nurse is paying above 50%. So we have a problem. We have a very large problem, and we are looking at different ways to help to remedy that issue in the community.
So if, like me, you sort of say, look at those numbers, and I think especially if you've either moved from somewhere else or you've lived here for a long time, these are shocking numbers in terms of people's ability to live in this area. And you might ask, so what should our response be? Well, I think the response should be to continue to And we asked that question in a manner in 2023 in a survey that we did. We asked, does affordable housing fit our mission? And we got a variety of responses, which I'll let you read yourself. But to summarize, many people referenced Matthew 25, which I'm sure you all know by heart. That's the story, that's the parable Jesus asks about, visiting people in prison, feeding them, etc. When he was in prison, and they say to him, well, Jesus, when were you ever in prison? And he says, if you did this for the least of others, then you did it for me. Other people referenced our baptismal covenant, which I also know you know by heart, so I'm not going to repeat it to you. And a couple of people referenced St. Jude, the patron saint of hopeless causes, which I think is, in this modern environment we're in, is quite relevant for people who are trying to own a home in this area and find living accommodations. I especially like the answer that just said, yes, it fits our needs, baptismal covenant. And I'd ask you, everybody here today, to say to yourself, to think for yourself, as a follower of Jesus, what do you think our response should be to this need that Sarah outlined? And one thing that resonates with me is the question from the baptismal covenant that says, truncated, will you respect the dignity of every human being?
So aside from housing our clergy and helping our community, these efforts can benefit our parish and campus by doing a few things. Can everyone hear me? We're good? Okay, thank you. All right, so aside from housing our clergy and helping our community, okay, we're good? Okay. So aside from housing our clergy and helping our community, these efforts can benefit our campus and our parish by providing modernized tenant space. So as mentioned earlier, the buildings that we currently have for classrooms that are being rented are over 50 years old. So if we were to make those potentially bigger or newer, they could be more attractive to our current and even future tenants. Increasing our campus's signage and visibility. So we would want to make sure that whatever changes we make or whatever we're looking into still makes St. Jude's the special place it is now that we all love and come to every Sunday. And by looking into affordable and clergy housing together, we'd be able to share whatever information we get from one project with the other. So if you look into, for example, zoning laws, that information would be helpful for both efforts. So,
Great. So next we're going to talk a little bit about a feasibility study. And as you recall, I showed the graphic that tells where we are in this process. And we're in the feasibility process. So what is this study that we're making, and what will happen during it? What's a real estate development consultant? That's one of the acronyms that poor Robin has had to learn over the next month, because we like to throw around our acronyms. And what's our input as a parish? How do we get involved in what's happening? So this has been something that I've pondered a lot, that this is what the answer is going to be that we hope to get out of the feasibility study. Is there affordable and clergy housing that can be built on the campus that meets our needs, that meets our mission, our wants, our desires for how it will look, how the campus will feel, etc., and is also financially attractive for a developer to build it? Because ultimately, we're not going to be paying for building affordable housing. We will be paying for building clergy housing, but not affordable housing. And so it has to be attractive to someone to pay for it. So those two things need to be in balance. And that's a key here. In fact, that's one of the reasons why you do a feasibility study, is you figure out, is any of this possible? Like, can we agree, and then can we get, will there be developers out there who'll say, yeah, this is an attractive project? And there's a reason for that, is that, there's actually a whole list of things that they're looking for. It's scored for affordable housing, so we'll be able to know at the end of it whether or not we're going to be fairly attractive. So the inputs into the feasibility study are these sorts of things. You know, what's our mission? We kind of touched on that a little bit. Building laws, you know, who are the potential developers out there? What's the local need? And when I say local need, it's like, is there a local need for senior housing? Is there a local need for very low income housing? Is there a local need for moderate income housing? You know, is there a need for teacher housing? That's what you mean by local need. And then who might be our potential partners? And of course, one of the most important things to us, which is our parish wants. You know, what do we want for space? What do we need? For example, tenant space in the new project. And what are we looking for clergy housing as far as, you know, how big, how many rooms, you know, where is it going to go on the campus, privacy needs, things like that. So ultimately then we take all of these inputs into the feasibility study and you kind of mix it up with ideas, and we use, obviously a real estate development consultant is going to be our expert advice on all this, and we end up with potential plans. And what they are is they are what are called size and massing studies. And we're going to get at least 2, possibly 3. And what they are is they tell us how big a building would be, how many units would be in a building. And this is for affordable housing. And then, of course, we'd know how big would a clergy housing be, and where would it go, and what would, you know, what's going to get moved around and what's going to stay. Even though I'll talk more about what's going to stay. Of course, they're also going to talk about what are the potential trade-offs. As you know, in this coming week, a lot of us are going to have to park over in the parking lot next door. And that could be, for example, a trade-off for us, is that during construction, we may need to rent that parking lot next door because of construction, we're just not going to have the parking that we need. So there's different things that we need to figure into that. And then, of course, we're going to also know big picture costs. How much are things going to cost? And then who might be our potential development partners for building any of this. So I'm going to go back to Festus.
So here's a slide that's going to highlight some of the things we'd be looking into during the feasibility study. First, we'd just be assessing our campus and looking at different things like soil condition and any potential utility issues or just things to be aware of. Next, we'd be making sure we abide by any local zoning laws or things we need to make sure we conform to. For example, California Senate Bill 4, which actually streamlines approval for projects just like ours. Consolidating the parish input we've been receiving into a vision for our campus. Looking at other affordable housing efforts in the area and seeing what's been built, by who, and who's funding them. And doing research on who will be best served by this, if it's students, if it's teachers, if it's families, that type of thing. Could you hit the next slide, please? And we want to walk out of this with a plan. So we'd want to develop at least 2 options for how we want the affordable housing and the clergy housing to look like, and do a test fit just to make sure they're feasible. Good? Okay. We also want to create a plan to make sure that our current classroom tenants have a place to go during any potential construction, as well as we have a plan for them afterwards. And we want to conform that these concepts meet Cupertino's guidelines for things such as density, building codes, and any other rules that apply to us. We'd also want to look into the financial feasibility of making this project a reality. And lastly, we want a short list of potential developers and builders. I'll pass it to Judy. I lied, Jen.
Okay, so as I said, I had mentioned about the real estate development consultant earlier, and I'm just going to shorten it to consultant from here on out. But the consultant will lead us through the feasibility process. This is someone who's an expert in the field of affordable and local housing, and also we have looked for those that work with churches, not only in our area or in California. So they are familiar with building on a church campus. They are familiar with the grant process that we've applied for through Trinity, and so they are experts for us. We are not experts. We care a lot, but we have only so many skills. They will complete the study as a deliverable, and the way we've done that, which I'll go into a little bit more, is that we've sent them out an RFP, but that's a request for proposal. But as I said, I'll be talking a little bit more about that. And then potentially, if we like working with them, they will become we'll ask them to become an owner's rep to us. And what an owner's rep does is someone that actually looks out for our wishes and wants. So as you go farther in the process, of course, you'll be hiring, if we go further in the process, someone like an architect to design things, a builder to build things. But they're looking out for their own needs too. So we need someone that's in our corner and can say, here's what the parish wants. Help us make that happen. So choosing the right consultant, and as I said, I mentioned RFPs. So a request for proposal is what we created as a team, and what it is just a list of all the things we hope to see in the feasibility study. Like, what do we want to learn at the end? And this was developed through comparing them to other RFPs from other parishes, as well as talking to Trinity, who is the expert in these fields of church development. And we came up with a request for proposal, which we sent out to 4 different firms. Actually, I think we sent it out to maybe 5 or 6. Yeah, thank you, Festus. Festus was in charge of a lot of that. And 4 of the firms responded with cost estimates. And ultimately, we narrowed our list to 2 firms that are pretty evenly matched in different strengths. They're a little better in different things. So we are planning on, due to vacation schedules and things like that, on making a final decision next week. So we don't have anyone to announce to you today, but we expect that we'll be able to hammer this out and come to a decision. But both of them are wonderful, and I don't think that it's going to be an issue for it, regardless of who we choose. We will not be signing a contract, even if we choose one. This is just something to tell Trinity, and it's something to tell the firms and say, hey, if we get the grant, then we plan on signing a contract with you. And that allows them to staff appropriately, so they're ready for us when we get there. So we will not be signing anything, and of course, anything that is signed, our treasurer, Scott, will be doing the signing for us. And the same with the grant. If the grant comes in, it will go through our regular church finances, just like everything else. Okay. Oh, it's still me. You guys are going to be really tired of me at the end of this. So grant, we've applied for a $60,000 grant, and that covers all but $5,000 of the real estate development consultant cost. And the other $5,000 is coming from us as what Trinity calls a meaningful contribution towards the project. Much like many other grants that you get out there in the world, they want to see that you've got a little bit of skin in the game. So sometimes it's called matching, but this is what we offered towards it. And this Investory approved that back in May. So the process of applying for the grant, as Robin mentioned, was pretty extensive. It was a couple months of really intensive work. There were 2 different stages, and then included things like a letter from the bishop telling us and telling Trinity that she supported our efforts, and she supported applying for the grant. So she's solidly behind us looking into this particular project. As I mentioned, we're not going to sign a contract, but we hope that we hear about the grant in September. They said maybe late August, but we don't know, because they go through the same process we go through. It has to go through their vestry and get approved. So even though they're a giant parish with a huge endowment, they have the same sort of processes that we have here. So they do the same things. So last, what we're going to talk about is the parish input into the study. And that includes things like the space, character. This parish input is the important stuff that I think that most of us really care about. How is this going to affect us as a parish on our campus? Oh, sorry. I have to back up. I skipped one. Nobody look at that. Okay. So this is the thing I had mentioned, earlier. We're considering housing on our church campus, not a housing development with an adjacent church. This is really important, and this has been something that's been really important to me since this whole thing started. We have this campus. We are a church. If we do something that is part of our mission, it is not because we want to put up a giant building in the corner and say, we've got housing, and then we're hidden behind here in a church. This is integral to us. So to me, this has been incredibly important that we maintain our church campus and consider whether or not we want to put any housing on it. So here, as I mentioned earlier, are some concepts. This is the concept from the architect way back a couple years ago. This actually is apartments. So one of the questions that we've had a lot is, how is it possible to put any housing on this? I mean, we are jam-packed with buildings, and the good news is it is possible. The ones that you see in black, you know, the parish hall sanctuary, those are not actually going to change. They're staying. Except for possibly the playground, but we will have a playground in any new design. It's the other things that we're considering. Moving the orchard, still having orchard. In fact, this has 2 orchard spaces. But also adding apartments, enough parking for all of our needs, a meeting space, which is something you guys have talked about before, wanting is additional meeting space because, you know, right now most people use the farmhouse, which can have people coming in and out of a lot. And then we'd have classroom space. So tenant space is incredibly important in all this. And then another concept could be townhomes, which are just 2 stories. They'd be on the edge of our property. And again, you have orchard space and you know, parking, classrooms. We'd also have a few apartments. And those would have garages and just be a different style thing. Some of this is, we're going to find out about what is the need locally. Is it for things like townhomes? Is it for things like apartments? That's one of the questions that we hope to ask through the feasibility study. So last, hopefully this is my last one, I want to talk about the campus character. One of the top 3 things in our 2023 survey that people liked about our campus was the main courtyard, trees, and a park-like feel. They all go together, and to me, that screams oasis. And it's one of the things that we talk about a lot, about maintaining that oasis and maybe even extending that oasis. And Jeffrey will be talking a little bit more about that in the next slide. Oh, and I moved ahead again. Sorry, one more back. Yeah, I think there's one more. Okay. Oh, so as I mentioned, these are the spaces that we expect will remain completely untouched, meaning we will not be affecting them in the slightest. And they also, not surprisingly, happen to be all the top spaces that everybody loves. So some of the other ones that you don't see on this list, if you're worried about them, it doesn't mean they're going away. It may just mean they're being relocated and possibly to areas where we can enjoy them a little bit more. So it doesn't mean they're going anywhere. So next, Jeffrey's going to talk about the orchard a little bit.
Thanks, Jen. So we decided to drill in on the orchard space a little bit because this seems to engender different emotions and reactions from people, especially those who've been here a while. So I don't know how many of you know that the church was originally purchased, this space here and the space next door where the Nazarene Church is today was originally purchased together from, surprise, an apricot farmer. So, you know, back in the day, this whole area was orchards. We ended up selling the space next door to the Nazarenes for their church. And in the development of this property, we decided to maintain this space on the corner where the orchard is today as part of just sort of remind us of the roots, so to speak, of what happened. Now, I don't know anything about fruit trees, pretty bad at growing them myself, but how many of you know the lifespan of an apricot tree? Okay, not you. Yes, Carol. Yeah, so it's about 15 years. So I was quite surprised to learn that the 15 years is sort of the growing span of an orchard tree. That's when it's producing fruit. So I was quite surprised to learn that we have replanted the orchard space in the corner several times. So if you're feeling emotionally attached to any of the trees there, you shouldn't be, because they're probably going to have to get changed. So this sort of is helpful in thinking about that space there, even though it is currently something that we look at and say, oh, that's sort of part of our identity. and was maintained to remind us of our origin as part of an apricot orchard. It's not something that the trees in it are really part of that identity. And interestingly, in our 2023 survey, there were quite a few people who commented that that space was underutilized. It may be utilized by our neighbors to, take some of our apricots, but today it is used to, the fruit from it is used for apricot jam that we give to our newcomers or to visitors. But one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that the orchard space was maintained. And you saw in the left half of this, which is the apartment example, I think, you'll see that we have actually 2 orchard spaces replacing it. And probably the most important thing to notice is the orchard space in that picture would be outside the sanctuary window with the apricot window that was recently renovated. And I love this graphic down the bottom, which is a concept of what you might actually see through the apricot window. Surprise, instead of seeing a parking lot, you might actually see apricots instead. And so that's part of the idea, is to make this orchard space more integral to the development and get a view like that. Apparently some of the visitors have commented they didn't even know there was a church here, in part because there's an orchard on the corner, or maybe it's just because our signage isn't big enough.
So I know that there's been a lot of concern about our tenants. And as if you've gone to the annual meetings, you know that our tenants are a huge part of our budget. About 40% of our budget comes in from rental of our space here at St. Jude. So that makes a lot of things able to happen, including paying our clergy, paying the light bills, everything. So it's important to us that we keep our tenants throughout this process. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It is going to be difficult. It's going to require some work. There's no doubt about it. And the approach that we have is that tenants are partners with us. So we want to make it a win-win for them. Some of our tenants have said, well, I'd really like a little more space here, or I'd like something. And that's entirely part of the process, is that their input, what are they looking for, in this, is going to be an important part. We've struggled a little bit with noise from some of our because we have older windows, for example. We've struggled with heating and cooling in the spaces because the heaters are extremely old as well. So these are things that tenants really appreciate if we have modernized facilities for them. And of course, the feasibility study is going to include all this. It's going to have a plan for them during construction, and we're going to be maintaining that dialogue with the tenants to make sure that they know what's happening and on board, and that they have what they need during construction. So short term, just to recap, it's likely a mix of continued leasing the parish hall, because as you know, we have tenants that are in this parish hall on weekdays, and then portables. That's almost the most likely thing that will happen, is we'll have some portable facilities to replace the classroom buildings during construction. And then we also need to come up with a plan for the playground. Our playground may stay, we really don't know, but nonetheless, they're going to need a playground space. Outdoor space use and egress for all of us, including those who use our disabled parking spaces right now, and for the children who come on the campus during the week. So that's also a concern. And then long term, the hope is that we have improved tenant spaces for them, and that they can look forward, much like we do, to a campus that is still as green and nice as it is now, but includes other updated spaces. So last, I also want to mention a couple other important considerations. Obviously, our mission covenant, incredibly important in this process. That's why we started this whole process. Parking. We know parking is a concern for a lot of people. We want to make sure that we have enough parking for us on Sundays, and we want to make sure that the tenants also have enough parking, because it doesn't work if we only have enough parking and tenants are in the spots, and then we show up on Sunday and we don't have any parking. That's not obviously going to work. And visibility and signage of church. I remember Carolyn actually mentioned this pretty, probably early this year. She says, we really need to work on that. And that's become kind of a focal point in our process as well, to look at the visibility and making sure that people know that we're here. Because that is a continual problem. Unless you're an Episcopalian looking for an Episcopal church, sometimes you don't know we're here. So it would be nice. We want to make sure that we fit with the neighborhood and campus buildings. Yes, the neighbors have occasionally in the past, especially regarding the Memorial Garden, been a little difficult, but we're going to obviously try to keep it in keeping with the character. And then last, we have the support of the diocese, and we will continue to make sure that they are involved in what's happening and that they know what's happening with any of our plans, because they ultimately have approval over whatever we do with our land. So here are some common concerns. We're going to talk about finances, housing, the operations of the actual housing, some government challenges, the tenants of the housing, not our church tenants, but the actual housing ones, and then post-construction. So I am going to have Judy talk about finances.
Well, you notice up there's pre-construction and grants. That would be like the grant from Trinity Wall Street that we've already applied for. And then possible outside funding. Sometimes government entities have funds for affordable housing. And then, of course, donations from the parish. For the construction, affordable housing is usually developed by developers who are nonprofits. And so like the verandas in Cupertino, which is on Stevens Creek just across from Main Street, there are 20 units there for senior housing on a half an acre, and those were done by Charities Housing and are also run by that group. So there would be no outlay from the parish. The clergy housing, we already have $400,000 in reserves to put forward for clergy housing. And as Jen just mentioned, we plan to keep our tenant income throughout the process as they look forward to better spaces, because especially the people in the church school, our spaces are not stellar. Who will manage? Who will manage and maintain the housing? Well, the management is the management company, which generally is the not-for-profit company that did the building of the affordable housing. The ground lease, the land is still ours. We would be asking them to pay like $1 a year for 90 years. But that's kind of our financial input to the project, is that we own the land that we're letting them use. And then terms of the lease include maintenance and what-if mitigation. For instance, if the not-for-profit ceased to exist, we will have plans for if that should happen, all these things that lawyers will think of. And for the clergy housing, the parish manages and maintains the rectory ourselves. So the next one.
Okay, we're going to hand it over to JR. Let me turn the sound up. JR, if you are there and want to unmute yourself. Maybe. There he is.
I believe I'm unmuted. Can everybody hear me? Yes, no? You can hear me? Yes, no?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, I'm going to move forward one way or the other. One of the questions that we get with some frequency is, well, can we really build on this site? Is that legal? What happens if the city says no? In this case, we've basically covered this ground already, and we've covered it in a few different ways. The first is that we successfully added part of our campus to Cupertino's housing element, and that commits the city to supporting housing on our campus. In addition to the fact that we are already zoning compliant for multifamily housing purposes, there's a number of state laws that allow us to use a ministerial process that does not involve the city council or the planning commission or a host of other potential political roadblocks to getting housing built on the campus. And even if we were to go through a normal discretionary process, any project that we would consider on the site would be protected by the Housing Accountability Act, which limits the city's discretion over what they can deny. And any project, again, within that remit would be exempt from CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which has historically been used by a number of different parties to stop housing development that they don't want to see. That said, we continue to be sensitive to what the neighbors would be interested in and fitting in with the local area. So we will be very careful about the design moving forward. That said, any project that we would be considering fits all of these criteria so that it can be feasible on the site. And I'll turn it back over to, I think, Sarah.
Oh, it's me. Okay, so back to who would live here, and what is affordable housing, again. So based on parish input from the couple of surveys that we've done, you know, mostly people are looking at teacher housing, those leaving foster care, extremely low income households. Something I do want to talk about a little bit is, I think a lot of times we kind of think, well, affordable housing is really only for those who are in those sorts of service jobs. That if you work in tech, you're fine. And that's just not true. We live in a place where you have to have 2 tech incomes to be comfortable. If you do not have 2 tech incomes, it's really hard to get by. Speaking personally, if we didn't have an inheritance to buy our house when we did, we would have had to move out of the area. I work in tech. I make more money than I ever thought I would. And we are still not in a necessarily great financial place to be able to afford to live in a single family house. We got really lucky to get in when we did, but if we had to contend for a couple of years with the way that rents were, we wouldn't have been able to live here. And so I think that it's really important when we're thinking about affordable housing that, yes, when we go through the demand and the market surveys, it might show that we do need to be looking into extremely low-income housing, but it might not. Even moderate housing around here is really difficult. If you pay attention at all to kind of all of the housing that's going up in San Jose and Santa Clara and everywhere else, the vast majority of them are, you know, a market rate place that has maybe a small percentage that has extremely low income. When you do that, you completely cut out the middle. There's no way for someone that is in low or moderate income to be able to qualify for the extremely low income, and also no way for them to be able to afford the market rate rent. So as we're thinking about this and as we're going through this, it's really important for us in that feasibility study to get the demand study and the market survey so that we really can see, really in Cupertino right now, where is the highest demand? What types of housing are necessary? Is it, you know, 1-bedroom apartments? Is it 2-bedroom apartments? Is it townhouses? What is the thing that is really going to serve the community and have the biggest impact with the space that we have to give? We also, in the feasibility study, as was mentioned, are going to look at potential partnerships. It is, of course, incredibly important that we are working with a partner who we feel comfortable and that has experience not only working with a parish, but housing in this area. luckily, or if you want to think about it as luckily, because there's such a need, there are a lot of different nonprofits that do development for affordable housing in the area. So we do have a lot of potential partners to choose from. And so it's just going to be trying to find the best one that we want to work with for our needs and for the needs that come up in the feasibility study. And I think that will bring us to questions. Have we gathered questions? Okay, so we are going to come around and gather what you all have written down. And if you haven't written something down yet, please write it down now. Come around, come around. Anything back there? Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Liz, do you want that last one or no? Okay. Cool. I'm dropping questions. Oh, jeez. Thought that was supposed to be, no, it was not.
Thank you. Bear with us as we collect questions. Oh, Jeffrey's going to take that one.
That's yours.
Design. Well, I'll start with this one because I think this will be a quick answer. How many units do you expect that we can create? That's a very good question. And we don't have actually a number. I can tell you that in the concept drawings that we had, it was roughly 30, 35, I think, apartments. And those were relatively large. They were 1,000 square feet. And some of that is going to be a balance of constraints because obviously we need to have enough parking. So whenever you have more parking, you cannot build, you have to have at least one parking space per unit. So in order to do that, we're going to be constrained by how many that we can build. Townhouses is fewer, somewhere in the low 20s.
This, since you have the microphone.
Oh, if you want, you can.
So a little bit about what costs during construction and then have any current tenants, like just talk about what you have to.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the tenant stuff. As probably a lot of you know, until very recently, I handled tenant relations along with Donna. And so I wrote the leases for the parish and stuff like that for all of our various tenants for the last, 5-ish years, something like that. So I know the tenants pretty well. And so what I've been doing is reaching out to each of them and talking with them about this project. We also have provided a written update to them as well so that they know what's going on. It isn't something that they find out and they say, hey, no one ever told us about this. So that's going to be the focus, is having the conversations with them to find out what their needs are and to keep them as partners during this process. So our largest tenant already knows about this, which is One Stop. They're the bulk of our and I've spoken with Lillian, who runs One Stop, 3 or 4 times now about this particular thing that we're considering it, and we'd love to talk with her about what she's interested in. And she's usually fairly upfront about what her needs and wants are, so that makes life a little bit easier, a little less difficult. So that's really what we're going to be doing. Now, during construction, obviously that's going to be another conversation. We know that they're going to need space. And I've already talked with them about the ingress-egress issue, because we have kids on campus. If you've been here during the week, you see them, and we need to make sure that they can get from their parents' cars to the spaces safely. And from what I can see, it is doable. And that's going to be something that's going to be part of our feasibility plan. Did I answer all that? Did I answer all that? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I have 2 questions here about noting that the cremains of Betty and Jim Harra are planted in the orchard. As some of you may remember, the the service and ceremony we had in doing that. So we're very aware of that. We actually also want to make sure that there are not other situations like that we don't know about, and obviously we're talking to people about that. And we're going to be very respectful about what happens in that process. I can assure you that we're not going to just be paving over the cremains of the Harras, but that we'll work something out probably in conjunction with Nick to make sure that they are potentially moved. I mean, without getting into too much detail, as most of you know, that they end up sort of dissipating into the soil, but we'll work something out that's respectful and appropriate.
So two things. One, just some talk about some other housing that is being built right now. You know, we do know there's a lot of senior housing that's going up in the area right now, including one that is for seniors or anyone with mobility problems. That anytime that you have senior housing, you do end up with less units, and that's just because you need more space for everything, for ADA compliant, you know, bathrooms and everything else. And so that is part of the feasibility study, is to figure out, can we even have senior housing if that's what is decided is the biggest market or biggest demand of the market. And then the school district is also building right now for teachers. I highly doubt that they're going to be able to build enough for the need. But again, that's what the feasibility study is about, is to figure out, you know, what really is that demand right now. And then one of the questions came in about, are there rules that might mean that we would get approved for affordable housing but not clergy housing? And so the clergy housing part of it is not actually, like, it is part and parcel of what we're looking at, and it's part of the feasibility study, but that's not really what the grant is for. The grant is for the affordable housing, and we're just trying to use the fact that construction is already going to be happening on campus to lessen the cost of that clergy housing. So as far as paying for the clergy housing, that's really going to be on the parish. Again, we already have that $400K sitting in reserves for us to use towards that. But it's not really about being approved, because the grant is really for the affordable housing, not necessarily the clergy housing, and the clergy housing is on us to decide if it's feasible and if we want to raise the funds to do that. Yeah.
In case anyone was wondering legally whether or not we can build a rectory, yes, we are allowed to build a rectory on our campus right now. That's not going to be an issue.
Thank you. All right, so I have two questions that are pretty related. They're about timeline. So one is, when will we hear back about the Trinity grant? So at the earliest, it would be late August, but we could also hear back as late as November. And then the other is, what is the potential timeline? Like, when will we start building? So to answer that question, I would actually refer to the timeline that's on a lot of the housing updates. So right now we're in the feasibility part of our long-term process, but this is a multi-year vision. We could see feasibility taking about a year. We could see design taking about a year. But each of those have a lot of steps. There's a lot of approvals, for example, from Vestry, getting the grant. So we could see it being a few years away, maybe two, but we can't really confirm like a timeline for when we'd have like boots on the ground building things. There's a lot of steps before that, but we'll get there, and it's part of a multi-year plan.
Thanks. And just to reiterate, I know that a lot of people are concerned, nothing has been decided yet. We're doing this process, we're following the steps, we're getting advice from, you know, Trinity and others that have been through the process about how to do it. But again, it's going to go through Vestry, and they're going to tell us whether or not we want to continue moving forward. But I have to applaud the team. They've done a great job and have worked really, really hard on this. So thank you to all of you. It's been a pleasure. And we're going to close the forum now. Thank you so much for coming. And please, if you have any questions you don't feel comfortable writing them down, or you think of it later, reach out to any of us. Oh, Sarah wanted to say something.
Sorry, just a note for all of you that are actually here. We've recorded this. It's on YouTube. So for those that weren't here, that have questions, please have them watch the recording.
Perfect. Great, thanks, and have a wonderful Sunday, guys. I don't want it to be a